Hello, everyone. I'm Tyler Chrestman, and welcome to the Chrestman Conversation. Today on the podcast, we're going to be talking about something that I find very troubling. Perhaps the most important topic of this election cycle that is not getting nearly the amount of media coverage that it should. It's kind of insane to me how little people are talking about this. And that's the fact that Joe Biden keeps refusing to say whether or not he's going to pack the Supreme Court. And apparently everyone in the media is just okay with him not answering this question. The fact that this isn't the A1 article in every newspaper is insane. It shows where the focus of the media is and the inappropriate amount of leeway that they are giving the Democratic nominee for president right now. I don't think that most people fully understand how important this question is and how the inability of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to answer the question is incredibly troubling. So what we're going to try and do on the podcast today is unpack this a little bit. That pun definitely intended there. And explain it a little bit why this is so important. So this was something that you heard Democrats who were more radical, your very progressive people advocating for quite a while now, this idea of packing the Supreme Court if they were to flip the executive branch and the legislative branch at the same time. Chuck Schumer recently said that nothing is off the table next year if Trump's nominee for the Supreme Court gets confirmed. So it's not if really, it's when Amy Coney Barrett gets confirmed, basically saying, well, if we take the executive, nothing is off the table. It's, again, very troubling. Here's the reason why this is troubling. Joe Biden is basically threatening to subvert an entire branch of government. Let's go back to Civics 101 here. We have three branches of government. We have the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. And the way our government is designed, those branches are supposed to be independent of each other. They're supposed to be the checks and the balances. They write the laws, they pass the laws, they approve the laws, they decide whether the laws are constitutional, they fit within the framework of our government, and each one of these branches has specific roles that they are supposed to fill in the workings of our government. And they're supposed to be at odds with one another. They're supposed to fight amongst themselves. They're not all supposed to be on the same side all the time. And what Joe Biden is threatening to do is basically taking a branch that's not necessarily on his side, and he's going to, again, subvert the branch and basically make it his ally. And it's just not okay. And we're going to talk more about this in just a minute. In order for him to add more justices to the Supreme Court, he would need to eliminate the filibuster in the Senate. This is a terrible idea. Harry Reid did that years ago, and all it did was now the Democrats just cry foul every time the Republicans put judges up because they got rid of the filibuster in certain cases, and it was a terrible idea then, and it's a terrible idea now. The filibuster in the Senate is incredibly important. It is an incredibly important thing because what the filibuster does is it basically clogs up the workings of government, which is exactly what it's supposed to do. The filibuster basically requires a supermajority of not 2/3, but 60 votes. 60 votes in the Senate in order to bypass a filibuster. Now, this is important because it forces you to build coalitions with the opposition. It's very rare that one side or the other has 60 members in the Senate at one point. It's often split more evenly. But what it forces you to do is it allows the minority party to advocate against something without just a simple majority being able to run roughshod over them. And it served an important purpose throughout history. This is a fundamental misunderstanding of what the role of government is. The reason why the filibuster is important is because government is supposed to be contentious. It is supposed to fight amongst themselves. And what the filibuster was designed to do was to allow the minority party to have more of a voice than just their sheer number would suggest that they have. Now, this is important because if you only need a simple majority, you can do things that large, gigantic sections of the country don't like. And the reason why this is bad is because you don't want 51% to just have their way with 49%. What you want is to say, we're not going to let the most radical ends of either end of the spectrum have too much pull. So in order to get to 60, you have to bring people in from the other side. You have to compromise. That's the reason we have the filibuster. It forces parties to compromise with one another so that they can move forward legislation that they can't pass if they refuse to talk to the other side. It's very important. And the Democrats are advocating getting rid of it. I've heard people say it's a remnant, it's a Jim Crow remnant. This is just an absurd take. This is nonsense. It is absolutely nonsensical to tie this in some way to racism. I think just because it makes it easier to demonize things when you just say it's racist. The filibuster's been around a long time, therefore it's racist. A nonsense, garbage opinion that no one should hold. So getting rid of it's a terrible idea. And there have been rumblings about this, the idea of packing the Supreme Court in the Democratic Party, but it's always been more radical. And you would think Joe Biden, the quote-unquote moderate Joe Biden, when asked about it, he'd give you a straightforward answer and say, no, we don't do things like that because that's an incredibly radical idea. Well, you would be surprised. I would be surprised. I'm very surprised. So we're gonna show some clips here. This first one is from the first presidential debate, which was not very presidential. Actually, pretty awful to watch. But we're just gonna show some clips. We're gonna show some clips and see if Joe Biden is very firmly against packing the Supreme Court.
So my question to you is, you have refused in the past to talk about it. Are you willing to tell the American people tonight whether or not you will support either ending the filibuster or packing the court?
Whatever position I take on that, that'll become the issue. The issue is the American people should speak. You should go out and vote. You're in voting now. Vote and let your senators know how strongly you feel. Vote now. Make sure you, in fact, let people know you're a senator. I'm not going to answer the question.
Why would you answer that question? Mr. Vice President.
So the idea, first of all, the idea that he's not going to answer the question because then it would be a story. Well, why would it be a story for you to say, no, we're not going to pack the Supreme Court? That seems like it's not a story at all. That seems like what everyone for the past 150 years has done, which is not do that. Do you think that would be a story if Joe Biden came out and said, no, we're not going to pack the Supreme Court? It would be today because he's refused to do it for the past 2 weeks. But if he had come out from the beginning and said, no, we're not going to pack the Supreme Court because that's not what we do. We don't break the rules of government. And it's just a nonsense idea. No, it's not a story. That's not a story at all. The story is, because he's not saying it, that we know the answer. That's the funny thing. We know the answer. So that was the first time. How about the next time? This was an interview the next day. This is an interview he did the next day with a journalist. And here's what he had to say the next day.
It's a legitimate question, but let me tell you, I'm not going to answer that question because it will shift all the focus. That's what he wants. He never wants to talk about the issue at hand.
Just real quick. He never wants to talk about the issue at hand. Joe, you just got asked a specific question about packing the Supreme Court, and you're talking about Trump. What does that have to do with anything? Why don't you answer the question? You don't want to talk about it.
He tries to change the subject. But let's say I answer that question. Then the whole debate's going to be, well, Biden said or didn't say. Biden said he would or wouldn't.
If Biden said he wouldn't, why do we think that would be a news story? I still don't understand the answer to that. How about Kamala Harris? Is Kamala Harris going to pack the Supreme Court? Let's see what she had to say.
I think that, first of all, Joe's been very clear that he is going to pay attention to the fact, and I'm with him on this 1,000%. Pay attention to the fact that right now, Lawrence, people are voting. They're voting. This is not, some can.
Right now, Lawrence, well, people are voting now. What does that have to do with anything? What does this is what they keep saying, by the way. So this is obviously a talking point for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, because every time they're asked about it, they say, well, people are voting now. Well, good. Shouldn't they know what they're voting for? Shouldn't you have to tell them what they're actually voting for? Wouldn't that be a good thing? But, well, people are voting, Lawrence, okay? So I can't answer that question because people are voting. Why are you campaigning at all then? If people are voting and you're going to use that as an excuse to not give people answers to questions, why don't you just stop campaigning? Why don't you just go home, sit in your basement, and wait for the election results to come in? Oh, because you don't actually believe that that's a legitimate thing to do, because the fact that people are currently early voting doesn't actually change the fact that you're in a campaign? Okay. Oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's nonsense. It's nonsense, and I don't know how they're getting away with it, not answering this question. This is a gigantic deal. It's a gigantic deal. It's the scariest part of their campaign so far, and it just is insane. Kamala Harris in the vice presidential debate was asked the same thing, very poignantly, by Mike Pence, and again, did the exact same routine. Well, people are voting. I'm not going to answer that. And then here was Mike Pence just shut her down beautifully. I saw a lot of nonsense. I didn't do one. I was at work when the vice presidential debate was on, so I wasn't able to do a live stream. But there were just the hot takes, the takeaways from what I saw. I wasn't able to watch the whole thing, but I watched parts of it. Just the worst. Everyone accusing Mike Pence of mansplaining. First of all, they're in a debate. And according to the people who talked more, Kamala Harris talked more. So Mike Pence, what? It's just so ridiculous. They say these things like, oh, we want to be treated equally and fairly. Donald Trump interrupts Joe Biden because he's a jerk and made a bad strategical error in the way he went about that presidential debate. And everyone says Donald Trump's a jerk. Mike Pence, in what amounts to the most polite interruption I've ever heard in my life, points out the fact, why don't you answer the question? Why don't you do this and that? And he's mansplaining to Kamala Harris. He's mansplaining everything. What a nonsensical take to have, that in a vice presidential debate, as he's disagreeing with her, but what he's actually doing, he's not just disagreeing. He's also disagreeing because he's a misogynist, and he's mansplaining. He's mansplaining to that proud black woman, and therefore Mike Pence is bad. No, he took her apart. In the parts that I was watching of this debate, he took her apart. It was bad. But like this clip right here, he asked her a question, then she gave a nonsensical answer, and he said, why don't you answer the question? And she said, well, I'm trying to answer it. No, she wasn't. Here's what he had to say. He absolutely nailed it on this
Thank
one.
you,
And
Senator Harris.
people, Susan, are voting right now. They'd like to know if you and Joe Biden are going to pack the Supreme Court if you don't get your way in this nomination.
Let's talk about
Once
Let's
again,
talk
gave
about
a
packing.
non-answer. Joe Biden gave a non-answer.
Trying to answer you
The
now.
American people deserve a straight answer. And if you haven't figured it out yet, the straight answer is they are going to pack the Supreme Court
That's absolutely
if they
right.
somehow win this election. Men and
Mr.
women,
Vice
I
President,
got to tell you, people across this country, if you cherish our Supreme Court, if you cherish the separation of powers, you need to reject the Biden-Harris ticket. Come November the 3rd, re-elect President Donald Trump, and we'll stand by that separation of powers.
So he absolutely nails it right there. They have given a non-answer on the most important question of their campaign. This incredibly radical notion, a complete non-answer from that entire side of the aisle. It's been crazy. You know what? I just realized I didn't actually show that clip. Well, you got the audio. It's the important part anyway. But it's been crazy. I just don't understand it. And this was actually the most egregious one that I've seen so far. This one from Joe Biden the other day. Somebody asked him about it again, and here's what he had to say.
They'll know my opinion in court packing when the election's over. Now look, I know it's a great question, y'all, and I don't blame you for asking. But you know, the moment I answer that question, the headline in every one of your papers will be about that. Other than
you'll know his opinion on court packing after the election. You know, not now, after the election. Does that make any sense to anyone? I saw somebody, where did I just hear this? I heard this a second ago. I thought it was great. Somebody made the analogy that it was similar to taking a wedding vows and saying that, will you honor and be faithful and truthful to your spouse? And you'll say, well, you'll know after the wedding. Well, it's kind of important to know that beforehand. The idea that you're going to take the most important question of the campaign and say, well, you'll get to know about it after you elect me for president. What? Would we allow that on any other topic at all? What's your health care plan? I'll tell you after the election. Hey, what are you going to do about the Middle East? I'll tell you after the election. We wouldn't allow it in any other way. And the media is just letting him get away with it. It makes absolutely no sense. Every question asked of him should be about this until he commits to an answer. If he's going to pack the court, why can't he just say it? Because he knows it's incredibly radical. And the second that people are educated about what this means, it's going to turn people off from his campaign because it's so far out there. And here's why, I guess, we should probably talk about why this is so radical. For over 150 years, there have been 9 seats on the Supreme Court. The last time that somebody attempted to put more justices on the Supreme Court, the last time someone attempted to pack the court was 1937, when FDR wanted to pack the court. And even the Senate, which was controlled by his party, said, that's insane. We can't do that. And it got shut down. It cost him a lot of political clout because he looked really bad when that happened. And there's a fundamental agreement between political parties in this country. And that is that there's a certain set of norms and rules that we all follow. Now, a lot of people say the Republicans in the past 4 years have stepped outside of those norms and rules. I don't think that that's true. They look to the holdup of Merrick Garland's nomination and squashing that when Donald Trump took office, sliding in more justices, and now they look at this Amy Coney Barrett nomination on such short notice as an example of Republicans flouting the rules. They're not. You might think that they're playing a little bit of dirty pool, and maybe I wouldn't even disagree, but it's not outside the norms. In election years, there have been 29 vacancies in an election year on the Supreme Court. And 29 times the president has nominated someone for that position. I believe 27 of those have been confirmed. So one of them was Obama. I cannot off the top of my head remember the other one, but I think those are 29 is definitely the number of times that there have been nominations. I believe 27 of them were confirmed I think I'm correct. The point is, it is not outside the norm for presidents to nominate people in an election year. It was outside and it wasn't outside the norm, by the way, for the Republicans to hold up that nomination, because I believe the other time that had happened, when there is a difference in the legislative branch and the executive branch, when they're controlled by different parties, they continually get held up, and they are actually confirmed at a lesser rate in general. So that's not actually unusual. It just happened to be unusual because of the duration that they held it up. But for his credit, whether you like him or not, Mitch McConnell really doesn't care what other people think, and did what he thought was right. And so, but none of this is outside the rules of politics as they've been established. Putting more justices on the Supreme Court, it basically breaks that pack wide open. It says, we no longer play by the rules. And also, this is another great example. When Harry Reid got rid of the filibuster, everyone said, you shouldn't do that because the Republicans are eventually going to get in power and they're going to use it against you. If the Democrats put people on the Supreme Court, if they pack the court with 2 or 4 more justices, when the Republicans get in there, why would they not do that in return? Can anyone answer me that question? Why do we think this is appropriate? To just subvert a branch of government, Democrat or Republican? I would be against it either way. I don't care if you take judges that I absolutely 100% philosophically agree with and put them on the court. It is a bad thing to do. And it is a big deal, and people need to be aware of it. This is a reason, this is a giant reason for me not to vote for Joe Biden. That's what this is. Because this is a fundamental breaking of our democratic process. And nobody seems to understand that. At least everyone in the media who should understand that is just happy to ignore it. The hatred for Donald Trump is so palpable that you're going to say Donald Trump is a radical, Donald Trump is an extremist, while Joe Biden is openly advocating for an extremist policy. At least not hiding that he's going to do it. He's not said no. If it was no, you could say no. It's not no. That's what we know. That's what we know for a fact. His answer to that question, will you pack the Supreme Court, is not no. So we're gonna leave it there for the day. I want to leave with the words of the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. In an interview last year, Ginsburg said of FDR's court packing plan that it was, quote, a bad idea in 1937. And it was no less a bad idea today because it would make the court look partisan. Well, I guess we can ignore Ruth Bader Ginsburg in this moment because she didn't like the idea of packing a court because she understood that it made the court, which is supposed to be non-political in nature, into a political animal. And that's bad for our entire republic as a whole. We're going to leave it there for the day. I am Tyler Chrestman. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you on the next episode.